Right, time for a rear brake pad change on the CB1100EX. Now, there's plenty of wear left on the existing pads. These are the OEM pads that were in there. But I went for some Brembo sintered pads up front, so I've decided to put the matching pair of sintered Brembo pads at the rear too. And again, I know all the stuff about that will wear my disc a little bit more and stuff like that, but this isn't a high mileage bike, so I'm not concerned about that. And not forgetting, you wouldn't really put sintered HH pads on the back and have regular pads on the front. Now, I could have this job done in 5 minutes. Literally take the pin out of that pad there, take this bolt out here, the whole caliper will rock forward. I can pull out the two pads, replace them, and I can really have this job done in 5 minutes. But what I want to do is see if the caliper's moving. In this instance, on the rear, you have a fixed disc, it doesn't move at all. The whole caliper moves on these pins here, and unfortunately one in line with the shock here. So what I'm going to do is put something under the, I'm on the center stand, put something under that rear wheel to keep that rear wheel where it is. I'm going to remove the lower shock bolt so I can swing the shock out the way. So I can take out these two pins here, if I need to, that is, take out these two pins here and grease them with brake paste. If it's all moving freely when I take these pads out here, I won't bother doing that, but we'll see how it is. So this could be a 5-minute job or a 25-minute job. So let's have a look and see what we have. Let's release that pin first. That should be it. Yep, okay. That rear pad came out easily enough. And they have a backing plate on this, probably to stop squeal. Okay. That outside caliper there, pad there doesn't seem to want to come out. So I was expecting to raise this caliper anyway, so it's no great surprise. I'm going to take this completely out. Okay, some thread locker on that. And lean that forward. Great. Second pad out. Yeah, there's absolutely loads of wear on these. I'm just matching it up with my Brembo pads up front. So now I could just stick in my new pads, reverse that and be done 2 minutes later. I know there's a bit of room in my reservoir, and because there's a lot of wear left on my original pads that I'm taking out, so there's not much difference between those and the new pads. So I know my reservoir is not going to overflow if I have to push the pistons or the piston back slightly. So this caliper's operation differs greatly from the front of the bike. It's relying on being able to slide on this pin at the front and on this bolt here as well. So these need to be nice and free. This one is a little bit dry, So what I'm going to do, oh, see there's a clip there as well. Clean that up. I can feel this is a little bit dry. I can feel a bit of metal on metal in there. So this needs, this caliper needs taken off, and it's the front one mainly. The front pin there needs cleaning up and re-greasing. I'm going to see what I can do. Right, I can't seem to getting to the insides of this pin to be able to grease it up correctly. So I'm going to have to get that shock out of the way. So I'm going to support the wheel below the tyre. So I've just wedged a couple of pieces of ply underneath that rear tyre there to take the weight off the shock so I can release the lower shock bolt. Right, that's 12mm. So I can't get a socket in there. Well, that came out easy. Okay, I got lucky. With the spacer up there on the top of the shock, I was able to take the bolt out and pull the shock out from the top, which allowed me to get it off the bottom. So that's just resting there nicely. So I can get to my bolt here. That was a bit stiff. Oh yeah, I'm glad I took that out. That's very dry. Not much grease on that at all. Bit of thread lock on there, which is dried out as well. So now I can lift the whole caliper. It's a real simple thing. I can give that a wash like I did previously, and I can probably push that in by hand. And as I say, I know this is only going to go in a tiny bit, so I don't need to worry about my reservoir. It's a real simple caliper, this. So just need to grease that pin and put it back in there and get that dryness gone. So my usual modus operandi, bit of warm soapy water. I don't need brake cleaner, it's just dust and stuff. Just making sure I'm getting rid of any grit. And I'll be moving the piston back ever so slightly, so I want to make sure that's clean so I don't force a bit of grit into the seal. I needn't be anal about this. That should do me. I'm going to move that piston in ever so slightly. Yep, just moved it in about 1 millimeter there with my hand. That might be all I need. We'll see. Sometimes you can't push these in by hand. See, when you're putting this spring back in, it goes in this way because the pad on the left, as I'm looking at it now, that's the pad that doesn't move. It stays on that caliper body and kind of moves in and out with the caliper body. And the pad on the right hand side is the one that moves with the piston. So this spring clip goes in that way. You can see there's a couple of lines here, just there and there, to kind of hold that left hand pad in place. So make sure you get that back in the right way round. There you are, there's my clip pushed back in there. Now, let's clean up these pins. I'm glad I did this now because if I pull that rubber out of the way, that pinhole is, the one just here, is bone dry. It's bone dry. So I've cleaned the pin up and we'll put some brake grease in that. So that should prevent my pads wearing unevenly or give me a poor rear brake. I'm terrible when it comes to putting things down. I just picked up my open brake paste pack and I put it down somewhere, I can't find it, so I'll have to open up a new one. This is slightly different, a liquid moly one. It's a blue paste, quite thick actually. It's good. I'll just get some in that hole before I put the rubber back in. That's better, that's better. Oops. I'm just going to wipe off a tiny bit of excess coming out there. Put my rubber back on. That's in. Now there's also some thread lock on there. So I'm just using the usual. Good enough. Let's get this caliper back in place. Right, that's just by hand for now. Oh, that's moving so much nicer, so much easier. That's great. And you see the way this mechanism works here. It's a bit easier than that. Whoops. Hang on, let's try and zoom in a bit. Now this rear brake caliper pin here, it's just a pin inside the rubber. And so it's not a tough fit. There's going to be a little bit of movement in that caliper there. So if you wanted, you could put a bit of brake grease or something on the inside of that, but it's not desperately required. You can see the action. You just want to make sure the rubbers get on the end pieces there, and I'll show you the action once they get in place. That's it. So that ends up sliding along like that, along those rubbers as the caliper moves. So you just want to make sure that that movement's clean. So a little bit of brake paste on the inside of that won't go amiss, but it's not absolutely desperate that it's done. It's just me to stop it rotting a bit, really. So you can see when this is back in, this is just a guide, a moving guide. It's not rock solid. It's to allow the caliper to move in as the brakes wear. Oh, and I'm using the backing plates off the old Nissan pads. They fit straight onto these Brembo pads, so they look like they'll perform some sort of anti-squeal function. Right, through a little bit of trial and error, I've found it's kind of easier to hold the two pads in place and drop the caliper back over the top of it. You can't put both pads in while the caliper's in the fully down and bolted position. So you just need to make sure the back of that caliper, those pins are sitting down nicely in the grooves. So if I try and hold these two together, so you can see them sitting in the grooves there. See that front one? I'll try and put an arrow on that. And then I'm going to drop the caliper over the top of it. Perfect. Perfect. Now I can start holding them in with a pin. Excellent. Just be careful, if you go around to the left hand side of the bike, you can see here my inner pad is not latched in correctly on the caliper body. It's dropped back down, and I have the caliper completely bolted up. From the right hand side of the bike, you don't see that, and it looks like the pad is in properly, but it's not. So just check that out from this left hand side. Now I've reseated that now, so you can see, if I can get this thing focused, you can see here this pad is sitting properly on that left hand side of the caliper there, and it's much better. But you could easily miss it, so do look round on the left hand side to make sure both of those pads are sitting in that caliper properly. And I'll just do that pin up. Now I can put my caliper pin bolt back in. There's a tiny bit of thread lock on there, but you don't need much. This bolt's not doing much really. This caliper will still be loose on this. Rear brake caliper bolt 22. I have my torque wrench set to 22. I'm a Newton meters man. The front pin there, they call it a pin bolt, rear brake caliper pin bolt, is 27. So I just need to make a little adjustment here. 27. Pad pin 17. Not much at all, is it? 17. Lovely. So that's my caliper all done. Greased, moving freely, new pads, rubbers are on properly. So I just need to put my shock back on. And the top little bolt is 9 Newton meters and the bottom is 26. So easy done. If my wheel hasn't moved, I can just get my shock back on. It shouldn't have. So my shock wasn't quite lining up. I just needed to get it up 0.5 millimetre there with my wedge. So the nut will pull that lower shock on nicely. And I just popped it in at the front there. Lovely. Now, I can't get the torque wrench in close enough to tighten that without taking this exhaust off. So I know that needs to be 26, which isn't an awful lot. It's the same as that front bolt there. See, I can't quite get in. So just have a feel for it. I've got a nice socket on there, and I know that'll be okay. The top one I can get to, that's a lowly 9 Newton meters, and I'll do that by hand as well. So I won't bore you with that part of it. So that's it, a mini overhaul of the rear caliper and some new pads. The only thing I might have done differently if the pads were worn right down would be you have to release the reservoir under the seat, and you have to unscrew the holding bracket there to get it out, as I showed in one of my previous videos when I changed the brake fluid in it. Release that, take some brake fluid off that if you're going to be pushing back this piston a fair bit, and that reservoir is quite full because there'll be nowhere for it to go. I didn't have to do it this time because my other pads weren't too worn. So that's it. Rear caliper overhaul and new pads. CB1100EX. Did you think I wouldn't do it? Before my first time out, brake cleaner. Make sure I get any of that brake paste off that I accidentally touched. I was very good, so I should be okay. Nice and free. Don't forget to operate your pedal a few times. Perfect. All done. Suppose I should clean my wheels while I'm here, eh?